Hey there, welcome to Synth Seeker. I get a lot of questions about how to write chord progressions within a particular key or scale. People ask, what's a scale? How do I pick a scale? And then once they have that scale, how do they write chord progressions in it? And then also, how do they write melodic lines that fit with that chord progression? The one thing that this video assumes is that you know what notes are which on a piano keyboard. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Okay? The only notes I'm going to use in this video is the ones I just give you. White keys only, starting with A. Because we're going to select the A minor scale, which is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Okay? But any scale, you can invent your own. To pick a scale is to make a list of the notes that you're going to use, generally within an octave. So from A to A, inside that distance, pick some notes. I'm picking these ones. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And A is repeating the bottom A, an octave. That's it. It's that simple. We're going to assign them all numbers. A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, D 4, E 5, F 6, G 7, and A at an octave is 8. Octave 8. Okay. When you want to make a chord for one of these notes, right? When you say, I'm going to make a chord progression, you're going to choose some chords. Well, what's a chord? A chord is generally 2 or more notes played at the same time, made up from notes within this scale. Okay. So here's a chord. Okay. Here's a chord as well. You might say that that's a nice sounding chord, if maybe sad. And that is a not nice sounding chord. You could say that that's a dissonant chord, or someone might say, oh, it sounds like you're playing a wrong note in there somewhere. But you're not. That chord is made of the first, second, and third notes of the scale we've chosen. It's totally valid. Okay. Some chords, just when you play notes together, sometimes they sound stressy, right? They add tension. And sometimes they sound more happy is probably not the right word, but less tense, right? They sound, I'm trying to stay away from theory words. They sound like they belong together. They blend well. Those two notes blend pretty well. Those ones don't, okay? It doesn't mean they're wrong, and it doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that they add tension. So if you're making something, let's say you're scoring or writing music for something that's meant to be scary, right? You maybe want that tension. All right, so don't stress about it. You've got a scale, some notes you've picked. In this case, we've picked 8 notes. A minor, okay? And you can make chords. What I'd like you to do when you get a chance is play notes in pairs and just listen to them and try and fit in your own head whether those notes blend well, harmonize, or whether they add tension. So I'm just playing notes in the scale we've chosen. All right, so you can explore your own scale that you've picked, okay? Now, what's a chord progression? If we make a chord, picked 3 notes out of the scale and I'm playing them at the same time. I want to move from that chord to another chord. Well, pick another one. A chord progression is up to you. It's a series of chords. You can think of it as a list of numbers. Just as the scale is a list of notes, a chord progression is a list of the numbers representing the notes in that scale that you're going to move through. So if these are our A minor scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You can create your own chord progressions. I'm going to pick 4 notes. 1, 6, 4, 7. All right. I'm going to make a chord progression with those 4 notes as the basis of the chords I'm going to build. Now, as I said, chords are just pick 2 or more notes, play them at the same time. That's a chord. Okay. What you're probably wanting to do is make chords that sound like the musical chords that are very common in the Western style music. Okay. There's a lot of theory around that. I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to give you a simple technique. When you're creating chords, if your notes are clustered together, they will add tension. Okay. If they're spread out a bit, they add less tension, or they can resolve tension. And you can spread them out quite far. The more you spread the notes out, even if they are notes that would normally be tense if they're very close together, right, that sounds very tense. But if I move these, some of the tension dissipates, right? Because I've spread them out a bit, and our ear finds that less frustrating, right? Where were we? Chord progression. So we're building a chord progression, 1, 6, 4, 7. Well, 1, and then we build a chord around that. Skip the next note to play the third, skip the next note to play the fifth. There's your chord, okay? And then the chord for 6. Skip the next note, and then skip the next note. Do you see the pattern there? That's 6. And then 4, I'm going to skip this note and play the next one, and skip the next note and play the next one. And then 7, I'll skip the next note to play its neighbor, to skip the next note to play its neighbor. So our chord progression becomes 1 to 6 to 4 to 7. And that's a chord progression. Now I'm going to record that very quickly here. All right, and there we've got it. I'll make it legato, meaning I'll make them all the same sort of full length. So that's our chord progression. That is a 1, 6, 4, 7 chord progression, meaning in my scale, we're playing the chord for the first note of the scale, then the 6th note of the scale, then the 4th note, then the 7th note. All right. And you can use whatever you want. It doesn't have to be 4 chords in the progression. It can be at whatever rhythm you like, right? Instead of just being, you know, you could play your chords like, right? The rhythmic opportunity there is infinite for whatever you like. I'm just doing it this way to simplify it. Now, looking at these chords and playing them, chord for 1, chord for 6, chord for 4, chord for 7. If we look at these on the piano, here's our scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, here's the note. 6, 4, 7. It's that simple to get started. Fine. Let's take these notes. I will copy those and we'll move them over. I've got a synth pluck. All right. And we're going to paste them in. So you can do a lot. Once you get that chord in there, play with it. Change your patches, play with synths, play with instrumentation, play with arpeggiation, delays, have fun with it. But as this is going, then, right, if you look at the scale here, look at our list of our MIDI notes, our pattern in our clip, you'll see that this chord, the 1 chord, and the next chord, the 6 chord, they don't overlap at all. They're far apart. It's like they shift up, and you can hear that, right? That's sort of the starting point. And then it shifts up a significant amount. That may not be what you want. So you may want to bring these notes closer together. This might be too high, right? Too much of a jump to jump from here up to here. You want it to be a bit, a somewhat smoother transition. Well, you can bring these notes down an octave. And now you see that 2 of the notes in this chord are actually repetitions of 2 of the notes in the first chord, right? The 1 chord and the 6 chord share 2 notes, right? So if we play it now, right? That's a little easier transition. If we do that again with our 4 chord, we bring it down, bring the 4 chord down an octave. Right? And you may or may not like this sudden shift from deep arpeggiation up to higher arpeggiation. We'll bring these down an octave. But maybe this is too low. I'm like, the notes are it's getting a little muddy here. Well, this note, right, is an F. Well, there's an F up here too. If this chord, right, that's our 6 chord. It starts with 6 in our scale. Well, this one exists here, but it's also up here, right? This note is the same as this note, just an octave lower. So we can move it up. And we could do the same with these 2 notes. We move them up an octave. It's the same note, just an octave higher. But what happens now is our chord progression transition is much, much smoother. And that may be more to your liking. So you pick a scale. Let's summarize what we've done so far. We picked a scale. This is A minor. Actually, A minor. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Okay. Then we picked a chord progression we wanted to do. We picked 1, the note that is 1 in our scale. 6, the note that's 6 in our scale. 4, 7. Now, maybe you don't want to invent your own chord progressions. Go search the web for popular chord progressions. There are hundreds of websites out there that have lists and lists of chord patterns, chord progressions, okay? And they're listed generally by the key they're in, which means the scale they use, A minor, C major, whatever. And then they'll have a list of, say, Roman numerals. And the Roman numerals represent the degree, the number that the note is in the scale. I am oversimplifying, but that will get you a long way to exploring and making some things that you can play with, okay? I strongly suggest, if you want to know more, you will eventually reach a point where you're going to have to learn some theory. And when you do that, I've got links in the description to great channels with tons of instruction on music theory that's either both extremely advanced and extremely simple, and you can just pick and choose what works best for you, okay? The goal here is to get it so that you can start making music. That's the point of this video. Let's get you started. So, where are we? We picked a scale. We picked a chord progression. The scale was A minor. The chord progression was 1, 6, 4, 7. Okay? We built some chords. We put them into our synth. we're arpeggiating the chords so that we've got an interesting pattern. So how do we do a bass line or a melody line? And I think bass lines are melody lines personally. I like melodic bass lines, but it doesn't matter. We'll see what we do here. So I've got a bass sound. All right. Maybe to your liking, maybe not, but it's a synth bass. I'm using it. A good place to start with bass lines is to just have bass lines mimic the root note that your chord is built on. So if the root notes of the sort of starting note of our chords is the 1, 6, 4, 7, you can do the same thing. 1, 6, 4, 7. All right. So I'm going to play back our arpeggiation. I'm going to record a bass line over it. Here we go. Okay, some of these notes are a little high. They're not so bassy. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to say, okay, let's bring it down an octave. In fact, let's bring all of these 3 down an octave. See how that sounds. Great. So there's a very basic, bass line. Okay. What can you do to add more to that? I said I'm going to make, I think bass lines can be melodic. Well, let's remove this. I'm going to play that same bass line. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some notes as transitions between these. I'm still going to sustain the 1, 6, 4, and 7 note, but as I move from one to the other, I'm going to play the note that's in between those notes. You'll see what I mean. Here we go. Did you hear it? So these notes, this is our 1, 6, 4, 7. So what are these notes in between? Well, these are the notes of our scale. You can play any note in your scale as part of your melody and see if you like it, right? It's guaranteed to either add a little tension or resolve a little tension. And it's up to you to decide what you want to do. As long as they're in your scale, that's a good constraint. And nobody will say, wow, that really sounds weird, right? You just say, it's within the scale. So here we played our 1. And we actually are rolling down, right? But this note, G, it's part of our scale. Our scale goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So we go A, G, F, that's our 6. E, D, that's our 4. Then I roll up. Right? To G. So that's how you build a bass line. And that also works for your melodies, right? So let's go back to a piano for a second. Okay. So I've got these chords. So I want to put a melody over that. Well, it's the same as the bass line. You just write your melody using the notes from the scale you're in. And for a given chord, what you can do is hold that chord down and go play some notes an octave or 2 up. As long as they're within the scale, and you listen and you say, does it make tension with the chord or does it resolve tension? And you decide what notes you want to put in. I suggest that you try and have a conversation when you're building your melodies. You want to phrase it as though you're speaking. Try that. You could throw in a bunch, 1,000 really fast random notes within the scale and it may sound awesome, right? That's a lot of guitar solos is like, a flurry of notes riffing, right? Really fast, and it sounds great. And you can do that. But if you want to understand how your melody fits into your chord progression, play the chord and then say, okay, what conversation do I have while this chord is playing? Right? Those are just notes within the scale. This one, that fits in this chord fine. In fact, it's one of the notes of the chord, just up an octave. And then that's not a note in the chord, but it is within the scale, and it sort of works. This one as well. That's a part of the scale, but it definitely adds tension, and that's okay as part of your conversational melody. Right? You start by playing one of the chords and decide what melody you want. Right? And then right? Not the greatest melody, but I'm just playing it off the cuff. You can do whatever you like. So I'm going to let this play back, and I'm going to play a piano melody over it. I'm going to make it up as I go, right? And it's going to fit within the chords. You may like that or you may not, but it's a melody. It's within the scale that we're working in. It's in A minor, and it fits, for the most part, over these chords, right? And you can go in and tweak them. So I'm not sure this note is exactly right. Maybe I'll move it around in the scale, and that's fine. You go back and you edit, or you record a different take or a different comp, okay? But it's that simple, okay? So what have we done here? You've chosen a scale. What's a scale? It's a list of notes. In this case, we've chosen A minor, which the list of notes is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. All the white keys starting with A. All right. Then, how do you build a chord progression based on that scale? Well, you take the notes from that scale, you give them numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you just pick some numbers. You make a list of the numbers, okay? In this case, we chose 1, 6, 4, 7. And we built scales for those. And I gave you a very simple pattern for making scales. You say, take the note that you're starting with. So if I'm doing 1, 6, 4, 7, my 1 chord is 1, skip the immediate next note in the scale and play the next one. And then skip the next note, play the next one. And that's your chord. That's your 1 chord. And then 6, you play the 6, skip the next note and play it, its neighbor, and then skip the next note and play its neighbor. That's the 6 chord. 4. You can see this on the little piano roll. Okay. And remember, if your chords are clustered together, that's going to add tension. It doesn't mean it's wrong. Those notes are all inside the scale. That's okay. What you can do is spread them out a bit to relieve some of that tension. And then basically your basslines or melodies are, again, conversational phrasing of notes based on the notes in the scale. And if you keep to the notes in the scale, some of them will add a little tension based on what's happening in the chords and the bass, and some will resolve that tension. And it's up to you to decide how you want that conversation to go. But as long as you stay inside the scale, you're not going to have anything that's really odd sounding to our Western ears. Okay? I've intentionally left out as much theory as I can, and I recommend that you work with this, and when you want to know more, go look at some of the other channels that I list in the description for learning more theory. But in the short term, I'd love to hear what you make. So if you cut a track or part of a track, or you make a loop or a sketch and you want to share that, post it to YouTube, drop a note, say, hey, it's on my channel, and we'll come take a listen. All right. That's it. So thanks very much. Do like and subscribe. And as always, you have been watching Synth Seeker. Have fun.